Jesus Christ was most likely a real person, and whatever version of this story you believe, his, let's say, leaving from the planet Earth caused a serious crisis for his followers. Many quit, and what Christianity as a religion would look like was in the air. What was left behind was the Jerusalem church, headed by James the Just, Jesus' brother. Upon further inspection, however, this name is a bit odd. The early Christian movement was still a very Jewish-oriented movement. James was really Yaakov, and they would pray at the temple, not a church. A Jewish convert to Christianity, Saint Hegesippus would say, he alone was allowed to enter into the place of holiness, for he did not wear wool but linen, and he used to enter the temple alone. The temple, not the church. If the early followers of Christ were Jews who viewed Christianity as a Jewish religion, how then did it become a non-Jewish religion? This shift can be attributed to one Paul the Apostle, a Hellenized Jew from Tarsus, located in southern Turkey. His impact on the religion of Christianity is controversial, to say the least. Regardless of the controversies, what is not in dispute is that this impact is consequential for the faith. The Christianity of Paul is still with us today, but the Christianity of James, a Jewish Christianity, is mostly gone. This can be seen in Paul's mark in comparison to James's in the New Testament. Books such as Luke and Acts of the Apostles were both written by Paul's companion, and most of the events in Acts are about Paul's career. In contrast, attributed to James is one epistle, and he is mentioned in Acts sparingly. This is a video about what happened to the other version of Christianity, a topic concerning what could have been and why it did not happen. The Christianity of James in the Jerusalem church was a Jewish Christianity. James was first and foremost a practicing Jew, did not drink, did not eat meat, and did not shave. He prayed at the temple and advocated for circumcision. Most notably, he believed in Christ as a Messiah and not as the Son of God. His epistle, being an earlier one, reflects this by never referring to Jesus as the Son of God. This epistle is placed near the end of the New Testament, and church fathers centuries later were not sure whether it should have even been included in the Bible in the first place. In 50 AD, James had to preside over the Jerusalem Council in order to deal with some doctrinal questions caused by the career of Paul the Apostle. This was a meeting entirely caused by the issue of circumcision, as Paul was preaching that you did not have to be circumcised, while some men who came down from Judea were saying the opposite. This was a serious debate at the time. Acts claims that James decided that non-Jews did not have to get circumcised, but scholars such as Ferdinand Christian Bauer suggest that James had more in common with the cause of those who wanted the non-Jews to be circumcised. However, this is a controversial position. Paul did not like circumcision, and was against most Judaizing tendencies in this religion. Sometime before this, Paul had attempted to create a Jew and Gentile Christian community in Antioch, where the two ate together, but was shut down by certain men from James. In general, Paul had a bit of a chip on his shoulder concerning the authority of James and the other apostles, and what they preached. In Corinthians, it is attributed to him that he said, "Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they descendants of Abraham? So am I. Are they servants of Christ? I speak as if insane. I more so, and far more labors, and far more imprisonments, beaten, times without number, often in danger of death." The reason Paul was so insistent on his right to preach in the name of Jesus as compared to the other apostles was because he never actually met Jesus in person, rather in a vision that no one else saw. Compare that to Jesus' actual brother, and Paul did not have an easy time proving his legitimacy. Despite how it distanced him from the Jewish origins of this religion, as Paul continued down his path, he would only come to hate circumcision and the Jewish aspects of the faith more. In Philippians, recognized to be a later source, Paul would say, "Look out for the dogs, look out for the evil workers, look out for those who mutilate the flesh." Now, circumcision was not the only conflict in the preachings of James and Paul. It would be silly if that were the case. They also had a theological difference based on whether faith or deeds should be emphasized. Paul emphasized faith heavily, while the Epistle of James focuses on deeds. While Paul was telling the Gentiles they did not have to be circumcised and spreading Christianity, the Jerusalem church worked in order to convince their fellow Jews to accept Jesus as the Messiah. Now, today we would call these people the Jerusalem church, but to the Jews who they were proselytizing to, they would have called them Nazarenes. Both Paul and James would eventually meet their end preaching. James was stoned to death in 62 AD by the Sanhedrin at the behest of the Sadducee Ananus. He was charged with the vague crime of breaking the law, whatever that means, and his brother Simon took charge after him. Paul met his fate near the end of his preaching tour in Rome, where he was beheaded by the Romans under Emperor Nero, probably around 68 AD. After the deaths of both of these movements' leaders, the Romans sacked Jerusalem in 70 AD. Most of Paul's followers were Gentiles outside of Jerusalem, and most of the Nazarenes were forced to flee Jerusalem. They supposedly went to Pella, in what is today modern Jordan. Some returned to Jerusalem, but after the Bar Kokhba revolt in 132 AD, the Romans expelled them yet again and turned Jerusalem into a pagan city. Afterwards, they scattered across northern Syria, the Golan, and the Dead Sea region. Thus, Pauline Christianity was able to survive Roman persecution by not having all of its eggs in one basket. Despite the Roman attacks, Jewish Christianity survived for several centuries afterwards, but unfortunately for them, most of what we know about it comes from Pauline sources who deemed them heretics. They are referred to by many names, and it's hard to know what the actual distinctions between each name was. However, they all believed, as was said by St. Justin in 150 AD, that Jesus is Christ and still only a man. In around 180 AD, the Bishop of Lyon, Irenaeus, would call them by the name of the Ebionites. Ebionites means poor. If you asked Ebionites, it refers to their humility. If you asked Christians, such as Eusebius in 324 AD, it refers to their poor and mean opinions concerning Christ. The Ebionites were a type of Jewish Christian, which existed upon a spectrum of the many Jewish Christianities, which had a wide variety of beliefs within them. In the polemic written by Irenaeus, Ebionites were criticized harshly. Irenaeus wrote, "They repudiate the Apostle Paul, maintaining that he was an apostate from the law. As to the prophetical writings, they endeavor to expound them in a somewhat singular manner. They practice circumcision, persevere in the observance of those customs which are enjoined by the law, and are so Judaic in their style of life that they even adore Jerusalem as if it were the house of God." Eusebius, in his own polemic, not only called them poor and mean, but went further to say that they used their own so-called gospel according to the Hebrews, deriding their own central texts. In 377, another church writer named Epiphanes called Ebionites snakes, Jews and nothing else, that were even hated by Jews, who apparently cursed them 3 times a day during prayer. Another prominent church figure named Jerome, who died in 420 AD, described the gospel of the Hebrews to us. This gospel heavily emphasized the role of James as one of the main apostles. Jerome, unlike the others I've mentioned, did not hate the Ebionites, but he did give a line that perfectly defined how they were seen by people at the time. Since they want to be both Jews and Christians, they are neither Jews nor Christians. Now, the Ebionites, or Jewish Christians, did not take to being called heretics lying down, and they have their texts responding to these polemics, throwing their own barbs at Pauline Christians. They write in their own theology in the Didache and the Pseudo-Clementine writings. The Didache is the least spicy of these. It was very early, probably written in the late decades of the 1st century. It focuses on the 10 Commandments and calls Jesus a servant of God. It does mention the trilogy, but some scholars suggest this is attributable to an editor. The Pseudo-Clementine writings, a 4th century document, include a letter which is pretty spicy. It's a letter that includes the story of one Simon the Magician, who attempts to join the Jesus movement in order to sabotage it. In Acts, there is a similar Simon who gets rejected, but this one is different. This Simon claims that he saw a vision of Jesus himself, to which Peter responds, "If then our Jesus appeared to you in a vision, made himself known to you, and spoke to you, it was as one who is enraged with an adversary. And this is the reason why it was through visions and dreams, or through revelations that were from without, that he spoke to you. But can anyone be rendered fit for instruction through apparitions? And if you will say, it is possible, then I ask, why did our teacher abide and discourse a whole year to those who were awake? And how are we to believe your word, when you tell us that he appeared to you? And how did he appear to you, when you entertain opinions contrary to his teaching? But if you were seen and taught by him, and became his apostle for a single hour, proclaim his utterances, interpret his sayings, love his apostles, contend not with me who accompanied him." This is so clearly a dig at Paul, who claims that he saw Jesus appear before him. As compared to the earlier text, this one was written in a time where the severance between Pauline and Jewish Christianity was pretty much complete. The gloves were off. Thus, in this time period, you see harsher criticisms from Ebionites. But the Pauline Christians would get the last laugh. By the 430s, the last church father to talk about them, Theodoret of Cyrus, tells us that people had more or less forgotten about them. After the 5th century, we just do not hear about them, and their movement more or less died out slowly over time. They were hated by Jews for not being Jews, and Romans and Christians for being Jews. Pretty much everything was against them, continuing as a religion. I want to end this video by saying this was not a polemic against Paul the Apostle. In this video, I was not attempting to prove that Paul was wrong, or evil, or a corrupter of the religion. Whether you believe Paul's contribution to Christianity is or is not legitimate is based on whether or not Paul did in fact receive a message from God, and that is something this video cannot nor wants to disprove. Rather, I wanted to show the way in which Pauline Christianity came to being and the way in which Jewish Christianity came out of being. This was a process that would go on to shape the beliefs of over 2 billion people on this planet. That is not even mentioning the theological implications of this movement. The fact that little has been said about the decline of this other strain of Christianity made me feel I could make a video very few people already have. I want to thank everybody for watching this video. Please like, share, subscribe. I want to thank my patrons. We have Tom Rollins, who's a sahib. I named them all after Arabic terms for friend. We have Adam Albilia for Rafiq. Nomad Star for Rafiq, which is fellow traveler. We have Martial Law for Khalil, which is an intimate friend. And we have Avocado Kirby for Khalil too. Thank you very much for your contributions, and if you would like to help this channel continue to grow, contributing directly to Patreon is the best way you can do that to help me. So Thank you all for watching. Goodbye.